Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. At the recent Two Sessions gathering in Beijing, Foreign Minister Qin Gang announced that China had pressed the acceleration button and sounded the clarion call for diplomacy. And Europe certainly seems to have answered that call, with Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and France's Emmanuel Macron all visiting Beijing in the last few weeks. But just what do those visits really say about relations between Europe and China? With me now is Justin Vaïsse, founder and Director General of the Paris Peace Forum, who was with President Macron on his recent trip to China. Justin, thanks ever so much for coming on the agenda. What was it like being on that trip?
Thank you for having me. So I was invited to be part of the delegation, as were a number of personalities, including CEOs, that was widely reported, but also representatives from the National Assembly, artists, intellectuals or academics or others, in order to sort of reopen China, if you'd like. That is to say, after 3 years of no ties, no personal encounters, not only between leaders, but also people to people, it was important that leaders such as Chancellor Scholz or Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez or President Macron and Ursula von der Leyen would meet Xi Jinping in person, and that civil society ties would resume.
So what was Macron trying to achieve for France and, along with EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, for Europe?
So 2 or 3 things. One was to resume ties. As I mentioned, I think it's really important that these leaders actually meet one another and talk. And Macron was able to see Xi Jinping for a bit more than 3 hours on Thursday, and again 3+ hours on Friday in Guangzhou. And so that was important. Also have a trilateral with von der Leyen. So that was the first objective. The second objective, I think, was to insist with Xi on the large issues of this world, and that starts with Ukraine for the Europeans, and to have a real discussion on what it means, what the Chinese position is, and trying to tilt it towards insisting vis-à-vis Putin that the war stops, etc. The third thing, from my perspective, which was not widely reported by the press, but is one thing that President Macron insisted on at every juncture, whether when he was meeting Xi or when he was having meetings with other people, or with civil society, or with students in Guangzhou, was the importance of China for the global commons and global public goods. And there's one point that he mentioned at each time, which is the summit on a new financial pact on June 22nd and 23, which will convene in Paris all the leaders, including from IMF and World Bank, that are ready to reform the international financial architecture. We have a challenge before us, which is how do we finance both the development goals and climate? And for that, we need to reform the Bretton Woods institutions, and for that, China is important. And that's an example of how China matters in many issues, debt, but also on climate, on biodiversity, etc. So I think that was the third large objective, which was to make sure that China would participate responsibly in all of these things. And there have been a few good signs in the past few months, whether the Treaty on the High Seas or the Montreal Kunming Biodiversity Protocol. I think that mattered to Macron quite a bit.
So these are big things you're talking about, big asks. And I know that following his audience with President Xi, Macron emphasised that strategy of his, that strategic autonomy for Europe, presumably led by France, to become almost a third superpower. It's ambitious. Is it realistic?
Let's put it this way. Do we have another choice? That is to say, we will only suffer from an intensification of the US-China rivalry. What I mean is that if you have a bloc against bloc logic, and if you have a sort of bipolar order that solidifies and intensifies, it's only bad for Europe, because it means that this competition will increase spending on military issues, will restrict trade and exchanges, will take a toll on cooperation on many things that we need to cooperate on, like climate change and others. And so I think it's up to Europe to show that it's not equidistant between China and the US, by no means. And President Macron clearly stated that France was clearly in the camp of democracies, etc. But that we didn't need to be always in a fighting position vis-à-vis China or to push this to extremes, because once again we need also to cooperate and offer other horizons than an endless Cold War between the two superpowers. So Europe must exist for its own interests and for the interests of the rest of the world.
China's state media had hailed Macron's visit as an opportunity to inject new momentum and bring new vitality to China-Europe relations. Has it achieved that?
To some extent, yes. Macron has really tried. Remember what happened in March 2019 when Xi Jinping came to Paris for the celebration of the 55th anniversary of the re-establishment of diplomatic ties with France in 1964. And Macron, on this occasion, insisted that not only Jean-Claude Juncker, who was then president of the European Commission, but also Angela Merkel be present with him. And so it's the idea of Team Europe, right? And so it's in the same spirit that he suggested that Ursula von der Leyen come with him to Beijing and that they have a trilateral with Xi Jinping. By the way, he had also offered Chancellor Scholz an opportunity to do the same, but Scholz decided to go on his own. So that's the intention, and I think it's very well thought out, and it's a good thing for Europe. Now, of course, it didn't go entirely as planned. They received Macron very well. They didn't receive Ursula von der Leyen very well or equally, because she's not a head of state, and also because she had given this, I think, very good speech on the 30th of March on China, insisting on de-risking and a number of other points that she had made. And so it was a good attempt, but the end result was not as clear-cut and good for Europe as it was meant to be.
Now, as you mentioned, trade featured highly on Macron's list of priorities. He took with him this large delegation with representatives from Airbus, from EDF, from Veolia, and deals were done on green energy and aircraft sectors. How might all of that change things, do you think?
I think it was important to restate that Europe doesn't have a policy of decoupling from China. Europe doesn't think, and that was in von der Leyen's speech as well, doesn't think that we need to cut ties with China and that we need to create a bloc on our own that doesn't trade with China and that sort of considers relations only with one part of the world. It would be unrealistic, and it would do damage not only to the economy, but also most probably to in the political realm. Trade doesn't prevent war, but trade still helps maintain people-to-people contacts and interest, etc. Rather, what Macron and von der Leyen said was that we needed to de-risk, not decouple. De-risking meaning not to depend on China, like, for example, at 97% for rare earth minerals that are crucial to European industries. That's not good. We should de-risk that and not make ourselves vulnerable to China on this. But for the rest, having trade and investment with China, as long as this is done with our eyes wide open and with dose of reciprocity, is still good. And so Macron or Scholz or Sanchez taking with them CEOs is normal, and I think contributes to the overall, I would say, dampening of tensions with China and also to the progress of the economies on both sides.
Justin Vaïsse, thank you very much.
Thank you for your invitation.
So that's the view from France. But what about Spain? To mark 50 years of diplomatic relations, its Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has also met recently with President Xi in Beijing. With me now to consider that visit is Spain's former ambassador to China, Eugenio Bregolat. Thanks ever so much, sir, for coming on the programme. Now, a lot of Europeans are going to China. What's the message?
In the last few days, we have had the visit to China of the President of France and the President of the European Community and the Commission of the Community. And the previous week, it was the Spanish Prime Minister who visited China in order to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations. And all the European leaders, along with the German Chancellor who was in China last November, all of them have been very clear. We want and we need good economic, technological relation with China. We do not want to hear anything about decoupling. In fact, Germany has, as you know, a very large economic relationship with China. In fact, 46% of the whole European community export to China comes from Germany. Almost half of all the European exports to China come from Germany. Now, Germany gets more than 1 million direct employments from its exports to China. So it is obvious that Germany, and so said Chancellor Scholz, Germany cannot hear anything about decoupling. Nobody wants any economic decoupling simply because we depend on foreign trade.
Do you think that China-Spain relations are at a critical juncture?
I think that relations are good. They have been good all along. And, well, the visit of our Prime Minister, Mr. Sanchez, to China just a couple of weeks ago was very, very positive, successful. And mine, Europe wants to have good relations with China, not only economically, but politically. And everybody, the Spanish Prime Minister, the French President, the German Chancellor, everybody has insisted on the same, the strategic autonomy of Europe. Macron has been extremely clear about that. We do not want to be subservient to any other power. We want to take our own decisions, Europe is striving to be a really autonomous sovereign power. And this is the key.
Yeah. So let's talk about Spain and what Spain was really hoping to get out of the visit to China. I mean, Spain's taking over the rotating presidency of the European Council, but some might say that it's not in the first division of global actors. It's not decisive regarding strategic issues relating to China or to Russia. It isn't part of the G7, and it's only invited as a guest to G20 meetings. So how would you describe Spain's ties with China?
Of course, Spain is a member of the European Union, and we European Union members are very clear about the fact that one by one, we are relatively small countries, even the largest countries of the European Union. When compared with China or the United States, we are relatively small. We only can be a meaningful actor in international relations. We only can be a big power if we are united.
Trade and investment was a key feature of Sanchez's trip to China. And in fact, China's Li Qiang said he wants Beijing to expand trade and investment with Spain. Do you think that China sees Spain as a facilitator in getting what it needs from the European Union?
We are 100% in favor of a good, strong relationship between Europe and China. I think this is very, very, very clear. In this, we coincide completely with the position of France. Mr. Macron has been extremely explicit in the last few days when he was in China, and in the interviews he gave immediately after his visit. Europe vindicates again its strategic autonomy. This is fundamental. And of course, this strategic autonomy of Europe has its touchstone in the policy towards China. We consider that relations with China have to be positive, have to be good. We cannot in any way try to be in a negative position towards China. But wherever you look at this world, international cooperation is essential. Be it to avoid nuclear war, be it to combat climate change, be it for the fight against pandemics, for the recovery of the international economy, or be it in the field of artificial intelligence weapons, to try to avoid this world in which autonomous machines talking among them can decide on military decisions. All this has to be regulated. So wherever you look at, you need international cooperation.
Eugenio Bregolat, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Of course, the opening up and diplomatic acceleration of China reaches far beyond Europe. This weekend, Mohcine Jazouli, Morocco's delegate to the head of government in charge of investment, convergence and evaluation of public policies, headed to Beijing. Before he left, he spoke to me from Rabat. Thanks ever so much for coming on the agenda. So look, you're part of this delegation, you're heading to Beijing. What are you hoping to get out of this trip?
We are going on a roadshow to China this weekend to share Morocco's momentum with everyone. Indeed, during the past 2 decades, and thanks to the leadership of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, Morocco has developed a modern and highly diversified economy. We have built world-class infrastructures. We have more than 50 free trade agreements that connect us to the 2 billion consumers market, including the United States and the European Union. We have young, extremely talented and perfectly trained human capital. It's grounded to say that they have been instrumental in developing key industries such as automotive or aeronautics. Both appear as beacons of hope for the whole continent because they embody Africa's capacity to grapple with the sophisticated value chains. All in all, Morocco has managed to gather outstanding assets in order to stand as a major hub for investments in the region. So now is the right time to invest in Morocco. Morocco's momentum time has come, and we are going to China to let everyone be part of it.
So Morocco is open for business. Let's talk about opportunities for Morocco in China, because at the recent 2 sessions, China says it's going to be pushing its acceleration button, certainly in terms of diplomacy. Earlier this year, of course, it announced it was widening its doors, opening up for business post-pandemic. So what opportunities does that offer for Moroccan businesses in China?
Well, actually, I believe this could offer several opportunities for both China and Morocco. China's move to strengthen economic ties with foreign countries presents a great opportunity for Morocco. China's Belt and Road Initiative and Morocco's strategic location between Europe and Africa makes a perfect match. China's increasing openness to trade and its growing middle class presents a huge opportunity for Morocco to expand its exports to China. Morocco already exports significant amounts of products such as phosphate, textile, and food to China. And this trend is likely to continue as China's demand for high-quality goods and services grows. Finally, China's focus on cultural exchange and people-to-people diplomacy presents an opportunity for increased tourism and educational exchange between China and Morocco. As a matter of fact, Morocco is the only country in the region to have 3 Confucius institutes. This, of course, can help to strengthen the ties between the 2 countries and promote a deeper understanding of each other's cultures and traditions. South-South cooperation for win-win solution in a nutshell.
You mentioned Belt and Road, and I'd like to talk a little bit more about that and the projects that China has invested in Morocco, because it's the Belt and Road's 10th anniversary later this year, which is quite unbelievable to think, isn't it? How has that Chinese investment in Morocco played out so far, and how hopeful are you for more BRI investment and hopeful about that relationship, how it's going to develop?
Well, Morocco and the China relationship is excellent. This goes in line with the vision of the 2 heads of states, His Majesty the King Mohammed VI and His Excellency President Xi Jinping. His Majesty's 2016 visit to China paved the way to the signing of a joint declaration on establishment of a strategic partnership. And since then, the 2 countries have entered a new era of their diplomatic relationship. So our bilateral trade has skyrocketed. It has grown by nearly 50% to reach $6 billion. Investments have also reached an all-time high a few years ago. Let me remind you that Morocco was the first country in the Maghreb and among the first in Africa to join the Belt and Road Initiative. This has raised the Moroccan-Chinese strategic partnership to a higher level. So this initiative led to new opportunities. Nowadays, more than 80 projects are currently being carried out. One of the most prominent projects is Mohammed VI Tangier Tech City, the flagship project of the Chinese-Moroccan economic partnership, strategic partnership. We are talking about a new smart city with the biggest industrial zone in Morocco. It's co-developed by Moroccan and Chinese joint venture, and it's already operational, and Chinese industrial operators are already settling their factories there. So our relationship is strong. For us, China remains as one of our top priority markets for foreign direct investments. And again, this is only the beginning. The business outlook is very promising, thanks to our high-performing industries. The energy sector, aeronautics, automotive, and more broadly the field of mobility, both electric and thermic, of course, are adapting to new challenges and offering new opportunities. I can see here more specifically that electrical mobility could be a strong business case of cooperation between our 2 countries. Indeed, China's leadership in this industry, coupled with Moroccan raw materials and highly qualified labor, is a perfect match. As I said, Morocco is ready, and we require further investments for foreign countries that are poised to share their know-how, and we hope and we are sure that China will be one of them.
But you mentioned that this enormous industrial zone, you talk about the energy sector, the automotive sector, and in the same breath almost you talked about sustainability and how it's important for the businesses of the future, small, medium and large, to have that at their core. I mean, China has made its plans to become greener very clear. It's already a world leader, for example, in solar energy. And your finance minister said recently that Morocco does need to adapt its economy to take climate action. I mean, is that something that you're going to work with China on?
Well, my colleague, Minister Nadia Ftah, is completely right. Morocco stands as a continental leader when it comes to sustainable development. And this is the challenge of our time. His Majesty, the King Mohammed VI, put sustainable development as a major pillar of the country's economy since he accesses the throne. Morocco is now the first producer of renewables in Africa. They currently account for almost 40% of its energy mix, and we aim to reach more than 50% by 2055. Solar and wind resources are indeed significant, and we have access to large exploitable lands which are close to the coast. And I must say that we are super proud of this competitive edge. Morocco's steady involvement towards sustainable development was internationally determined, and it was appointed on the 22nd COP's venue. The kingdom was recently ranked 4th by the Climate Change Performance Index, and it appears to be one of the few countries that are still able to meet their engagement as part of the Paris Agreement. Now we are ready to engage in innovative fields. Green hydrogen is one of them. China is fully armed to tackle the energy transition. So, of course, we are looking forward to working together.
Mohcine Jazouli, absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for hosting me. It was a great pleasure exchanging and sharing Morocco's momentum through your channel. Thank you very much, Juliet.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Agenda podcast. Do join me next week when I'll be speaking to former President of the European Central Bank, Jean-Claude Trichet, to get his take on the state of the global economy. Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more Agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.